So will Trump find new leverage against Russia or abandon the issue of setting the Russian-Ukrainian war? And what are the main U.S. goals in Operation Southern Spear? This and other topics we will discuss right now. My name is Iryna Uzlova. Today with us is Yuri Rashkin, host of YouTube channel Rashkin Report, Rashkin News, Rashkin Report in English. Yuri, hello, glad to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
A few days ago, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says that virtually all sanctions against Russia has been exhausted. At the same time, Senator Lindsey Graham says a bill designating Russia as a terrorist state is on the table. So will the U.S. find new ways to pressure to Russian dictator Putin? And can we agree with Rubio that sanctions against Rosneft and Lukoil are already having an effect on Putin's economic war machine?
It's very important to see if the sanctions against Lukoil and Rosneft actually take place as they're supposed to in just a week now, or if there's going to be a last-minute phone call from Putin or Lavrov, as we know, who's already looking for ways to meet with Rubio. So I think the expectation is that we know Donald Trump has three stages of decisions. One is press release, second is announcement of date, and third is the follow-through. And right now we're on stage two, and the expectation is that chances are something's going to happen so that Russia gets 2 more weeks, metaphorically speaking or realistically speaking. And I think we also should abandon any hope of reasonableness from this State Department, because I believe yesterday they came out with a new directive saying that as one of the rules that they're now going to look at for when evaluating people who are looking to enter the United States is obesity. So if you're overweight, you might not be now allowed in the United States, according to Marco Rubio. So clearly, we're not using that approach to like sanctions against Russia. Russia can do anything it wants. But I think that Donald Trump is currently losing momentum, desire, ability to do anything about much of anything, as he is absolutely drowning in the Epstein scandal. And yes, there's Venezuela. Yes, he's got his Justice Department and FBI that he's now telling to go ahead and investigate all the people that it sounds like he's been covering up. Because when it sounds like he's like, I'm not going to cover up for you anymore. But that doesn't sound like Donald Trump, who is A, talking about ending the war in 24 hours, or B, is getting asked about ending the war in 24 hours. Right now, I think that most of the excitement that journalists get is to ask Donald Trump about Epstein and see Donald Trump walk away. And that's kind of a new, I can understand journalists who are getting kind of excited by this, because usually Trump wants to speak endlessly about anything, including invading Nigeria. But when it comes to Epstein case, he walks out, he doesn't want to do it. So in that context, asking about Ukraine might be the next question after Epstein. But when the president already left, then what do we have left? That means that this opens up both opportunities and dangers for Ukraine, because the opportunity there is that the United States is less involved and less engaged in trying to control or oversee or demand or command much of anything when it comes to Ukraine, because the chief executive is a little occupied. But at the same time, that means that this is not a topic of priority for Trump at the moment. He's got other fish to fry, very personal fish now. And interesting, of course, that part of the connection with Epstein is that Epstein at the end was looking to monetize his relationship with Trump. And one of the people that he reached out to was Lavrov, or at least looking to reach to was Lavrov and Russians. So for those that were wondering if Donald Trump was perhaps recruited in Helsinki I think that his connections to Russia go far, far longer than that. But now there seems to be at least some proof that there were people who were trying to help make it happen, arrange it, and so on. So there's a little bit of evidence in that into that pile. I think in that situation, putting pressure on Russia, I mean, Trump might have to, if things go poorly, right now the House of Representatives is looking to vote on the Epstein case, then publicizing or publishing the documents related to Epstein case. Senate is slated to do that next, and the pressure is growing on Senate to vote to release. And then Donald Trump might be in a situation where he might have to veto it, and then we're going to see some really exciting things happening. This is not time for Trump to put pressure on Putin. He might have to use Putin to escape. I mean, difficult challenges that may lie before him. So I think that Putin is in a little bit of a, once again, Trump's parachute. And I think that this means that Ukraine can do whatever it wants, and Putin will do whatever he can. And when Trump said that this is, let's just let boys fight it out in the park, this is potentially due to the fact that this person standing that could have pulled children apart is being, consumed by his own scandal covering pedophilia.
But White House, is it Trump, in one voice every day say that Trump is not guilty. And this Epstein case is not about Trump at all. It's all fake and democracy provocation by Democrats.
Yes, you're right. It is a provocation from democracy. I think that this is a big problem for Trump, and he acts guiltier than he might even be, which is not helping his case, because so much of what we know about Nixon and other crimes is that the rule there is that it's not the crime, it's the cover-up. In this case, we see a president desperately trying to obfuscate, change topic, look here, look there. You talk about tomahawks, using tomahawks against American cities, or possibly giving them to Ukraine, whatever gets the attention of the Epstein case. And at the end, it just keeps coming back to it. And then he says, well, and this is typical of Donald Trump, because we see that when things happen, he panics and does the wrong thing, and it explains it in such a way that makes no sense. We saw this with COVID. We see this with practically every crisis that envelops this person, is that he tries to explain it in a way like affordability is a hoax by Democrats. Come on, like the prices go up. This is not a hoax by anybody. So he makes it worse actively. And that's part of the situation that we find ourselves in, is that and actually Epstein wrote this in one of the emails, is that when faced with uncertainty, Trump will act even more unpredictably, more irrationally. He's not probably there's a reason why he lost those casinos. He's not a good gambler.
Mention about Lavrov really all this week and previous week, but we don't see exactly Lavrov in public, but his text message through different Russian propaganda medias are full of ridiculous statements. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is convinced that Trump was given backdoor reports that disrupted the Putin-Trump meeting in Budapest. Lavrov and other Kremlin officials, however, are convinced that meeting between the American and Russian leaders could still take place in the nearest future or other kind of future. But under what conditions it can be if Russia's demands for Ukraine's de facto capitulation remain unchanged? And Donald Trump doesn't like such Russian capitulation statements.
It presumes that given enough time, Russia will achieve its goals, and therefore that's when Lavrov says Russia will be glad to meet with Trump in anywhere, because according to Putin's opinion, this war should have been won in 3 days, and then meeting in Budapest. but it didn't happen. There was no 3 days, there's no 3 years. The war is ongoing, and therefore the delay. It's like there was an old movie that was made during World War II in the Soviet Union that was called At 6 o'clock After the War. And so the point was that you and I, good friends, were going to meet on that bridge after the war at 6 o'clock. And so there was actually even ending when they meet. But the war actually hasn't ended yet in real life. So it was kind of like this political, war fiction kind of a idea. Maybe this is what we're happening here, where Lavrov has just announces that 6 p.m. after the war, Putin and Trump shall gather in Budapest and to conduct their sacred mass. But it's also interesting that Lavrov has disappeared because these people are of such advancing age that it really is remarkable that they've lasted as long as they have. Putin has outlived the lifespan of an average Russian male by decades. At the same time, we see that these days, and the President of the United States demonstrates this, if person doesn't exist, it's okay, as long as they are able to continue to send text messages. If they can send tweets, then we know they're alive and they're fine and they can be president of the United States. There's absolutely no problem. Everybody look elsewhere. And of course, Lavrov put himself in a difficult position because he could not walk away from the fact that Russia wants the whole thing. And that means that Trump is not going to have the meeting. And therefore, somebody has to be blamed. And it can't be blamed, this maniacal Putin. So let's blame his horse. I mean, Lavrov. And so this is something that Lavrov got put into a position, but he's been in this situation again for decades. So he should be able to handle this kind of rejection on behalf of his boss. Maybe the situation is getting so bad for Russia. It's going into winter. The attacks from Ukrainian drones are getting more and more intense. Russia is burning, and there is less time. And so now when Russia says, or Trump says, we'll give Russia 2 more weeks or until November 21st or whatever, this is as much opportunity for Ukraine as it is an opportunity for Russia to finish something that it couldn't do in 3 days or 3 years.
Yes, but we see that not only Putin, Lavrov, and these other representatives of Kremlin regime still think about Trump's Putin meeting, but also about this summit dreams Viktor Orban. Because Hungarian Prime Minister thinks that Trump can save his result on future elections. But I think that Donald Trump only thinks about his results and renomé among his voters. But Viktor Orban is not very important to Trump. But he can make some cases for Orban that he can buy Russian oil. Except other countries. So what in this situation we should understand?
I think that there's several things. I think, first of all, we need to understand that Orban is in a difficult position, and therefore he is excused from his obligations until after election. And that's so fascinating to watch because when Trump says, Hungary has only one problem, and that is that it's surrounded by dry land, and he's giving Hungary 12 months to solve the problem. It's not like in 12 months Hungary will be on the seashore. It means that in 12 months, the election will be behind them, and then Trump will deal with them then. And this is a very typical approach that we see between Trump, and this is a transactional, the essence of transactional governance, apparently, foreign politicking, realpolitik a la on sale. When we see that if you are an ideological ally of this president, then you can get in line of having your country become a client state of United States, which is really not how we used to run things. We used to have allies with whom we had common interests, priorities, values, that whom we trusted. All of that is seems to be gone now. And when Great Britain, I don't know actually who announced it, but Great Britain is no longer sharing intelligence with the United States about what's going on in the Caribbean because they don't consider that to be frankly legal. Then you see that now we are at the state of having clients like China does, like Russia does, and Hungary is very comfortable in this environment. Like Belarus could be next, because all these countries that are ruled by people who consider themselves ideological allies of Donald Trump, they expect to get something for their troubles because loyalty doesn't come for free, And Argentina has shown the way by getting $20 billion and then $20 billion more and then winning the election in favor basically of Trump. Although it's Malay and it's, although whatever the details on the ground may be, this approach to policy seems to be functioning at the moment well, has proven to be effective for this president. So therefore, Hungary is going to get in line, Belarus is going to get in line, and you can imagine who could be following any of those countries because there's an incentive. This is what Biden was speaking about when he said that we need to show that democracy can solve people's problems more effectively than authoritarian state. This is how authoritarian state solves problems, from election to get the right people in charge to continue dismantling democracy until the next election. And then you give people a little bit more, you get through another speed bump of an election and you move on, which is why it's so crucial that at the last election in the United States, right here, we saw that this policy, this Trumpism, was rejected because every Republican lost. Basically, I can't think of a single Republican that did well the whole night. So this whole blue tsunami should be a kind of a response to all of these Hungaries and Argentinas and whoever else there might be next.
On the night of November 14th, the Ukrainian military used long Neptune missiles on targets in the territory of the aggressor country of Russia. This was reported by the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, and General Staff of Ukraine later today. He published Zelensky a post in which he spoke about the report of the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine and several reports of the Commander of the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. How effective is the work of powerful Ukrainian weapons on military targets in Russia? Straight our status in the eyes of Western allies and the American leader, in particular in the issue of selling us the same tomahawks, for example, and other long-range weapons, and also creates an understanding that Putin is not able to defeat Ukraine on the battlefield, as the Economist writes in a recent major publication, for example, also.
I feel that similarly to the United States, only Ukraine can defeat Ukraine, and only United States can defeat United States, because the inventiveness of Ukrainian people and their ability to come up with new ways and new defenses and drones, an army of drones and new rockets, I believe it has incredible capacity that is yet to be reached. At the same time, we see that politicians all over try to use different events to distract from their problems. And similarly to what we see in the United States, well, not similarly, but in the United States, we see a president who is covering up, essentially is acting like he's covering up pedophilia. And that is, and then after that, anything that is done by this president, by this administration, is viewed as a potential distraction. In Ukraine, I think that Ukraine is battling not only Russia, but also its internal corruption, which is, I think, is admirable that it is battling it, because putting up with it would be worse. And we need to remember that unlike Russia, where you'll have one mafia trying to decide, get victory against another mafia by getting somebody set up and having all sorts of, show trials that mean nothing because everybody's corrupt. In Ukraine, we actually see agency that is fighting corruption, that is being supported by the people. And that's what should be happening because God knows corruption happens anywhere, including right here in the United States. And so the question is not whether the crime occurs, but what is done about crime. And when we see the reports about Neptune or any other rocket and amazing achievements of Ukraine, we need to understand that if these weapons, like there's been a lot of questions about do flamingos really exist, and not the birds in Florida. And I think if those reports turn out to be fake, I can understand, or highly exaggerated, I can understand where the value in them in terms of fog of war, and God knows our president knows the power of a good press release. But there's also credibility and trust that is eroded if it turns out to be not true. However, if it does turn out to be true, then it does send the message of Ukraine as being a country that is able to control its own fate and will put a stake in the heart of Russian aggression, either itself with its own weapons or with help from the glorious American president who has big tomahawks, which can really put an end to this bloodshed and bring Putin to the negotiation table. Similarly, in a way to how Trump got involved with the war against Iran, between Israel and Iran, where Trump saw how well Israel was doing and decided that it was time for him to get involved. And look, another war he got involved in and stopped at the same time. What is MAGA so unhappy about? I don't even understand.
Edward Carr, deputy editor of The Economist, writes that Putin is incapable of defeating Ukraine on the battlefield, and Putin's strategy is failing. Some believe that the Russian president believes in the advantage of time. Otherwise, he would have already negotiated peace. But the lessons of Vietnam, Afghanistan, and Iraq show that leaders cling to power in the hope that something, anything, will change. So Putin is likely to continue the war in 2026, waiting for his generals to find new tactics, Ukraine to run out of resources, Zelensky government to collapse, or Trump or Europe to lose patience. But if none of that happens, Putin will face a terrible price. And it seems that none of this will not happen, really.
What it seems like is that I know that it is kind of unfashionable to say these days, but thanks to Biden, the Ukraine got 3 years of time and a lot of help. Not enough help, but a lot of help, which bought it time and really helped to sustain and withstand several waves of Russian orcs who were, attempting to, when Putin threw everything he had before we had the really modification into, drone warfare that we see now. This had a lot to do with aid from President Biden, who saw the responsibility that the United States differently than some other people, but still more so than any other president, I believe, before and after him, and was more decisive than any other American president in helping a foreign country that is not a member of NATO. I don't know, I think officially barely an ally, but I think that Biden saw the responsibility and importance that Ukraine plays in stopping Russia. And that put, even though right now it's kind of hard to discuss things that didn't happen and how things could have gone differently. But it's pretty obvious that if President Trump was president when Russia engaged in the big invasion of Ukraine, this war would have been over in, well, maybe not 24 hours, but pretty darn sooner than, not much longer than that, because there would have been no aid. There would have been just, maybe not even a plane for Zelensky to evacuate. I think that with this understanding and with this, with these particulars, Now Putin is stuck because the window is closed, because now Europe understands how crucial Ukraine is, because Ukraine has found way to not defeat, but to fight back effectively with drones and destroying Russian oil refinery capacity. And we know, if John McCain was right about anything, is that Russia is a gas station masking as a country, as a state. And so this is where it's important to hit the gas station where it hurts. Of course, there's also a matter of gas, but I think that this is a work in progress, and then I trust there will be more attacks coming. So with all of this, window has closed because Europe is paying attention. Ukraine got its module back if it ever lost it, and now the world can learn from Ukraine of how to be. That when we are looking to find ways to resist and to find way to fight back in the challenges that we are facing, all of a sudden we now look at Ukraine and tell ourselves that we should be brave like Ukraine. So maybe it's United States help Ukraine, and now Ukraine is helping all of us.
Yes, President Donald Trump has ordered the launch of an operation against drug cartels in the Western Hemisphere. The Department of War has already begun carrying it out, according to a post on X by U.S. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth. Today, I am announcing Operation Thousand Spear, led by Joint Task Force Thousand Spear. This mission defends our homeland, removes narco-terrorists from our hemisphere, and secures our homeland from the drugs that are killing our people, Hegseth wrote. He also stated that the Western Hemisphere is America's region. What are the Trump's key goals in this military operation and in the region as a whole? Is it the war or on drugs, yes, or oil profits?
Well, I feel like first, if this really is starting, then I would like to apologize and bring condolences to everyone whose lives and livelihood is going to be affected by this that are not drug cartels, because drug cartels deserve to be destroyed, but we know that there will be a lot of people that will suffer around, and this is going to be, it has to be a legal operation, and it clearly is not going to be one. Because we see that our president is looking to distract attention from the Epstein case again and again. It's almost like, oh, look at this. We're starting a war with Venezuela, and the House of Representatives haven't even voted yet. Wow, can you think what's going to happen when it will be time for Senate to vote? And will he start a nuclear war if he has to veto the Senate voting to release Epstein files? How is this? Where is this going to end if we're already at war with Venezuela? Yes, this is a Trump approach of punching those that are not able to punch back. And we see this everywhere, from his policy towards transgendered people to policy towards immigrants to policy now towards Venezuela. But it will not distract people. It will just create more chaos and criminality. And the people that are suffering from drug addiction will find other ways to get their addiction satisfied. This is ridiculous. We are not doing anything that's actually going to help people who need our help. This is also typical Trump administration, where instead of providing funding for people to help them solve their problems, we're going to use army and bring that, or National Guard and bring that in our cities, instead of helping police by funding more police. It's just a reality on steroids of what we've been experiencing in the United States for a long time. And because Venezuela cannot vote in the United States, and Marco Rubio has had a problem with Venezuela for a long time, we see that whenever Trump is in power, Venezuela is like Russian Voronezh, which is the proverbial city that's always going to be suffering no matter what's happening in Russia. It's always going to be tough for poor Voronezh. So in this case, Venezuela, just no matter what, they're going to be, if Trump is in power, they're going to be in trouble. And is it going to change anything? Is this going to lead to a protracted war? Which is probably the most relevant question. I will say one, it is distracting attention from Ukraine, because one of the great things about peace in the Middle East, whether it exists or, how solid is it, we never know, is that when there is no active war operations, that means that people can pay more attention to Ukraine as the other war, and really bigger war at this point, and always been, than the war, and so the activities in anywhere else in the world. But now, if Venezuela is going to be entering that picture of tragedy and destruction, then that means that we'll be speaking more about Venezuela. And here I am speaking to you, a journalist in Ukraine, about Venezuela. So in a way, this distraction is working. But ultimately, this is not a president who is willing to engage. So far, he has shown that he's not willing to engage in long-term, protracted military activities. He is interested in quick grab and run, dash and roll, dash and run. Grab some, like similarly to how Russia grabbed Crimea when its neighbor's house was on fire. Russia ran in and said, "Oh, you won't be needing this," and ran out with Crimea. That is an approach that our president has, one of many things he clearly always admired about Putin. So I think that this is more likely to be a severe storm than a climate change, because running Venezuela is ultimately not something that Trump was interested in. Well, I mean, he'd like to in his perfect world, but if it's going to be difficult, he'll do something else. And if it's not distracting attention from the Epstein case, he'll have to do more and shift his resources elsewhere.
Thank you very much for this conversation. You're explaining your thoughts and your time. See you next week. Take care of yourself.
Thank you. You as well.
Yuri Rashkin, host of YouTube channel Rashkin Report and Rashkin Report in English, and also Rashkin News. Please subscribe to Yuri's YouTube and to our YouTube, War and Politics 24. My name is Iryna Uzlova. See you later. Take care.